The forest was silent, not the silence of peace, but the silence that follows death. Smoke drifted through the black trees, rising from the ashes of battle. The air still smelled of fire and metal, of things that had burned too fast. Somewhere among the ruins, a human soldier moved. Her name was Mira Solon, Sergeant First Class of the Terran Rangers. She was 28, strong, trained, and fearless, or at least she used to be. Now, she lay half-buried under a fallen branch, her armor cracked, her breathing heavy. Her helmet flickered with static. Every few seconds, her visor flashed warnings in red letters. Oxygen low, pulse irregular, radio offline. She blinked, forcing her eyes open. For a moment, she didn't remember what planet this was. Then it came back to her. Kareth 4, the Predator world. The battle had been a disaster. Her unit had landed on this world to clear out an abandoned research base. No one had told them the Kareth, the giant wolf-like alien species, had returned to reclaim their land. They were called predators by most soldiers. Tall, fast, and merciless. Their claws could cut armor like paper. Their eyes glowed in the dark. Entire squads had vanished in minutes when the Kareth hunted at night. Mira had fought them before, once on the moons of Elra. But this time was different. The Kareth were defending their home. And humans, she thought bitterly, had walked right into their nest. She coughed, tried to move the branch from her chest. It was heavy, but her body armor helped her push aside. She sat up slowly, groaning. Around her, the forest floor was littered with broken machines and bodies, both human and alien. Her squad was gone. She was alone. The forest was strangely beautiful in its destruction. Tall silver trees, their leaves glowing faint blue under the sky, now stood torn and burned. The ground shimmered with glass where plasma fire had melted sand. She reached for her rifle. The weapon was cracked. No power. She tossed it aside and checked her belt. One knife, half a medkit, 2 rations, and a canteen. That was all. She took a deep breath, forcing her heart to slow. Think, Mira, think, she whispered to herself. First rule of survival. Move. Don't stay where they can find you. She scanned the tree-line. Nothing moved. No sound, no wind. Just the soft crackle of cooling metal. She stood, limping slightly, and began walking toward the old bunker site marked on her visor map. Maybe she could reach it before nightfall. But after 10 steps, she stopped. Something small brushed against her leg. Her muscles froze. Slowly, she looked down. There, on the ground beside her, was a tiny gray shape. It moved weakly, letting out a soft sound, a whimper, not a growl. Mira crouched. Her hand went to her knife by reflex, but she didn't draw it. The small creature was no threat. It was the cub. She had seen pictures in training files. Kareth cubs, the young of the predator species. Their fur was soft and silver when young, their eyes bright gold. They were supposed to grow into deadly hunters. But this one looked no older than a human toddler. Its fur was dirty, its little claws chipped. And then she saw another, a second cub, lying half under a piece of metal plating. Both were trembling. Their bodies were cold. Their mother was nowhere in sight. Myra's instincts screamed at her to leave. These were predator young. If the mother was alive, she would kill any human she found near them. But another instinct, the one she thought she'd lost, whispered something else. They're just children. She looked around again. No movement, no sound. Mira knelt slowly and slid the metal sheet away from the second cub. It whimpered weakly and then curled tighter into a ball. Its breathing was shallow. "Easy," she whispered. "Easy, little one." Her voice surprised her. She hadn't used that tone since before the war. Soft, gentle, almost human again. The first cub crawled closer to her. sniffing her boots. Its nose twitched. Then, to her shock, it climbed onto her lap. Mira froze. The creature turned in a circle, then pressed its small head against her armor and fell asleep. Her throat tightened. "What the hell are you doing, kid?" she murmured. She could feel its warmth even through the metal plates of her suit. The second cub, seeing the first one safe, crawled over too. It climbed up onto her chest, curled up right under her chin, and closed its eyes. Mira sat there for a long moment, not daring to move. She could feel their soft breathing, their tiny hearts beating fast. It was the strangest feeling. Two creatures that should hate her, trusting her completely. And then, far away through the burned forest, came a sound that turned her blood to ice. A deep, echoing roar. It was filled with rage, pain, and grief. The mother was alive. Myra's eyes widened. She looked down at the cubs, still sleeping on her. She knew that sound. It was a predator's call for its young. She swallowed hard, her heartbeat pounding in her ears. The silent forest wasn't silent anymore. It was waiting for the hunter to come home. The forest was no longer quiet. Somewhere in the distance, the roar echoed again, low, deep, and filled with pain. Mira Solon froze. Every nerve in her body told her to run, to drop the cubs and hide. But she didn't move. The two little creatures were still curled up on her chest, breathing softly, unaware of the danger coming closer. She whispered to herself, "You don't even know what's hunting you, do you?" Her voice shook a little. She had seen what a full-grown carrot predator could do. They stood twice the height of a human and could crush armor with one hand. Even elite soldiers didn't fight them. They just tried to survive them. Mira looked down at the cubs again. They looked harmless, more like alien kittens and monsters. One had a tiny scar over its left eye. The other had a patch of dark fur on its back shaped like a small wing. For a moment, she wondered if they even understood what had happened to their mother, or if they thought she was still coming back. The forest rustled nearby. Myra's body tensed. She carefully lifted one of the cubs off her chest and reached for her knife. The sound faded again. Maybe it was the wind. Maybe not. She needed shelter, a place the mother wouldn't find her sent to easily. Her helmet flickered, the cracked visor struggling to function. The map inside blinked weakly, but she saw a signal. An old bunker, half a kilometer away, built during the first human landing years ago. It might still have air filters and sealed doors. Mira looked at the cubs. "You too are coming with me," she muttered. "If your mom finds us out here, we're all dead." She wrapped them in her jacket, careful not to hurt them. They made soft sounds but didn't struggle. She stood, pain shooting through her leg where the armor had split. Still, she began walking, step by step, through ash and silence. The smoke had thinned, but the air was still thick and strange. The glowing leaves of the forest gave off just enough light to see by. Every step sounded too loud. A crunch of dirt, a click of armor. Once, she heard a loud thud somewhere behind her. Something big was moving. She didn't look back. She couldn't. After what felt like an hour, she reached the entrance of the bunker. The metal door was covered in vines, rusted but still standing. She scanned the access panel. Dead. No power. "Figures," she said. Then she kicked it hard. The door didn't move. She tried again, slamming her shoulder against the metal until finally, with a sharp screech, it gave way just enough for her to squeeze through. She slipped inside, pulling the door closed behind her. The bunker smelled of old dust and oil. Darkness surrounded her. She turned on the weak lamp built into her wrist plate. The light cut through the gloom, revealing a small control room, half broken but still standing. She set the cubs down on a blanket of her torn jacket. They looked up at her, blinking with sleepy golden eyes. "Yeah," she said softly, sitting down beside them. "You're safe. For now." One of the cubs crawled closer to her boot, sniffed it, and let out a little chirp. The other tried to climb her leg, but slipped, landing on its back with a soft thud. Mira couldn't help but smile, just a small one. "You're trouble, both of you," she said. She checked her canteen. Only a quarter full. She opened it and poured a few drops into her hand, holding it near the cubs. They sniffed it, then started licking the water eagerly. "Guess that means you trust me," she said. For a while, there was peace. The cubs settled down beside her, making quiet, purring sounds. Mira leaned against the wall, exhaustion finally catching up. But just as she closed her eyes, her helmet gave a faint beep. The motion sensor had picked up movement, large, fast, and close. Her breath caught. She turned off her light and crouched, listening. Outside, through the cracks in the door, came a faint shadow moving across the ground. Heavy footsteps. The sound of something breathing. Slow, powerful, angry. Mira held her breath. The cubs stirred and whimpered softly. She pressed a hand gently over their backs to keep them quiet. The footsteps stopped right outside. Then silence. Seconds passed like hours. Finally, after what felt like forever, the shadow moved away. The ground shook slightly as it disappeared into the forest again. Mira exhaled shakily, feeling her heart hammer in her chest. She whispered. That was her? The mother. She looked down at the cubs again. They had huddled against her, shaking. She reached out, brushing her fingers gently over their fur. "It's okay," she murmured. She didn't see us. But she knew the truth. The predator mother had caught their scent. And next time, she wouldn't just pass by. Mira leaned her head back against the wall. For the first time in years, she felt a strange mix of fear and guilt. She had fought hundreds of aliens before, but this was different. She wasn't fighting a monster. She was hiding from a mother who had lost her children. Her eyes grew heavy. The cubs climbed back onto her lap, curling close for warmth. Their tiny bodies trembled. As she closed her eyes, Mira whispered to herself, "We'll make it through the night, somehow." Outside, under the pale alien moon, the predator mother lifted her head, her glowing eyes scanning the horizon. She let out another cry, louder, longer, filled with grief, and the forest listened. Because now, the hunt had truly begun. When Mira Solon woke, she didn't know how long she had slept. The light from her visor said it was morning, if you could call it that on Kara 4. The planet's sun was dim and pale, its light struggling to pass through the thick silver trees outside. The cubs were still beside her, one curled against her chest, the other sleeping near her arm. Their small bodies rose and fell with each breath. They looked peaceful, unaware that the forest outside was waiting to kill anything that moved. Mira sat up slowly, every joint in her armor aching. Her head throbbed. The smell of smoke had faded, but the air still tasted burnt. She looked down at the cubs and whispered, "Guess we made it through the night." Her voice sounded tired, almost soft. She wasn't sure when she had last spoken without shouting orders or giving reports. It felt strange. She checked the bunker again. The place was a relic, built by early human miners years before the war. The power cells were dead, the walls cracked, rust lined every corner, and water dripped from the ceiling. She found an old console on the far wall. When she brushed the dust away, a faint blue light flickered. Somehow, one tiny backup cell still had power. She pressed a few buttons until a small map blinked to life. Her base camp was gone, wiped out in the battle, but the console showed another signal about 20 kilometers north, a distress beacon. Someone else might still be alive. For the first time since the crash, Mira felt a spark of hope. Maybe she wasn't the only human left. Maybe there was a way off this cursed planet. But then she looked back at the cubs. They were awake now, staring up at her with glowing gold eyes. The one with the scar blinked and made a low chirp, tilting its head. The smaller one crawled onto her lap again, rubbing its nose against her armor. Mira sighed. "You too are trouble," she said. She didn't know what to do with them. Bringing alien young to a human beacon was insane. The soldiers would shoot them on sight. But leaving them here, alone, would be worse. She thought about the mother again, that sound in the night, the deep, grieving roar that had echoed through the forest. It hadn't been the call of a monster. It had been the sound of something broken. Mira rubbed her face, thinking, "All right, Solon," she muttered. "You can't save everyone. Pick a plan." Her first thought was survival. Get to the beacon, contact command, call for extraction. That's what any good soldier would do. But another voice inside her whispered, "They're just cubs. If you leave them, they'll die before the day ends." The logic didn't matter. Her heart had already decided. She grabbed her half-empty canteen and poured a little into her palm again. The cubs licked the water happily. Then she tore a piece of ration bar and crumbled it into smaller bits. They sniffed it, then started nibbling like hungry animals. Watching them eat made her smile, without meaning to. "You're going to get me killed," she said softly. The console beeped again. Mira turned to see a faint red mark flashing on the edge of the map. A heat signature moving south. Big. Fast. She needed to guess what it was. The predator mother was tracking them. Her heart skipped. If she stayed here, the bunker would become a trap. She had to move. Now. Mira packed quickly. She tied the cubs to her front with a strap of cloth, letting them cling to her armor. They mewed softly, confused but calm. "Stay quiet," she whispered. "Please." She opened the bunker door. The cold air hit her face like a slap. The forest was alive again, quiet, but full of unseen eyes. Every sound made her flinch. A falling leaf, a snapping branch, a distant echo. She moved low, silent, her steps careful. Half an hour passed before she reached the ridge overlooking the valley. From there, she could see the scars of last night's battle. Burned fields, shattered ships, metal bones scattered across the ground. And then she saw it. A shadow moved between the trees below. Huge, the size of a tank. The light caught its armor, black scales, blood-red markings. The Kareth mother. Mira froze, pressing herself behind a fallen log. Her breath came in short bursts. The cub stayed still, sensing her fear. Through the gaps in the branches, she could see the predator sniffing the ground, following their scent trail. Its head turned left, then right. Its movements were careful, almost deliberate. The creature stopped. It lifted its head and let out a low growl that rolled through the trees. The sound made Myra's bones ache. She watched as the predator picked up a small piece of torn cloth, her jacket sleeve, from near the bunker's entrance. It sniffed it once, then roared again, louder this time. Myra's chest tightened. "She knows," she whispered. The mother turned and began moving toward the ridge. Myra's instincts screamed run. She slid down the hill on her knees, clutching the cubs close. Branches whipped her armor as she pushed through the forest, heart pounding. She didn't stop until she reached a shallow riverbed. The water was cold, running fast. It would hide her scent. She stepped into the water and followed it downstream, her breath ragged. Behind her, somewhere in the forest, the predator's roar shook the trees again. Mira didn't look back. When she finally stopped miles away, the sun was setting again. The cubs were asleep against her chest, tired from the journey. Mira sat down on a rock, soaked and exhausted. She looked up at the darkening sky and whispered, "The search begins, but not just hers." Because now Mira Solon was searching too, not just for safety, but for a reason to still believe there was something good left in this war. And she had found it in two small hearts beating beside her. The forest of Kerith was alive again, but not with peace. It trembled under the steps of a mother in mourning. The Kerith warrior known among her kind as Vorotai moved through the trees like a storm. Her armor was cracked and darkened with blood, her claws still wet with dust from the battle. Every breath she took came out as a growl. Her people had long taught that Kerith do not weep. Grief is weakness, they said. A true warrior honors the dead by killing the living. But as she stepped through the burned ruins of her den, Vorotai felt something she hadn't felt in years. Fear. Not of pain, not of death, but of loss. She crouched beside the broken nest where her cubs had once slept. The walls were scorched, the ground still warm from the plasma blast that had torn through the forest the night before. Pieces of metal, human metal, lay scattered around her home. She touched the ashes gently, her massive claws trembling. Two small footprints, lighter than air, led away from the nest. Her breath caught. Her cubs had survived the blast. They had escaped. And then her eyes narrowed. Around the tracks, she saw another print, a human boot, heavy, pressed deep into the soil. A low growl rumbled her throat, deep and terrible. The humans had come here again, to her world, to her land, to take what was hers. They had brought war once before, and she had forgiven them. She had believed the peace talks. But this was beyond war. Now they had taken her children. Vorotai rose to her full height, towering above the silver trees. She threw back her head and roared, a sound so powerful that the birds scattered for miles around. It was not a roar of rage. It was the cry of a mother who had lost everything. Her keen eyes scanned the ground. The trail led south, toward the river ridge. She bent low, sniffing the air. The scent was clear, faint but fresh. Human, blood, oil, and something else, her cubs. She began to move, silent as shadow, fast as thunder. Each step was measured. Each breath was filled with purpose. In her mind, images flickered, her cubs tumbling over one another in the den, biting playfully at her tail, their soft squeaks when she brought them food, their wide eyes staring at her with innocent trust. She could still smell their warmth, still hear their hearts. She stopped for a moment at a stream where the trail crossed water. The current carried away the scent. Clever, the human was masking her path. Vorotai tilted her head, listening. Her hearing was sharp, far beyond human range. In the distance, a faint echo metal hitting rock. Armor. She smiled, baring sharp fangs. "You cannot hide from me," she whispered in her own tongue. Her language was made of clicks and low tones, ancient and old. The trees seemed to shiver as the words passed through the air. She followed the faint sound deeper into the valley. Every few steps, she touched the ground, feeling vibrations. Every few minutes, she raised her head to test the air again. Hours passed, but she didn't slow down. Her heart was iron, her will unbreakable. At last, she reached a ridge overlooking the riverbed. The human scent was stronger here, fresh and mixed with fear. She knelt, pressing her claws into the mud. A scrap of cloth fluttered nearby, part of jacket, torn and stained. She picked it up, bringing it close to her face. Her nostrils flared. Yes, the scent of her cubs was all over it. Her claws clenched. She crushed the fabric in her hand, and the rage that she had buried for so long returned like fire. But beneath that fury, there was something strange. The human scent wasn't purely hostile. It carried warmth, sweat, and something she couldn't name, a trace of care. She frowned. Why would a human smell comfort? Why would her cub's scent cling to it so closely? Her mind warred with itself. One part screamed for revenge. The other, the mother, whispered for understanding. She shook her head, growling low. "No mercy," she said to herself. "Not until I see them safe." She moved again, crossing the ridge in silence. When she reached the next clearing, she saw it. Faint footprints, small, leading beside larger human ones. Her chest tightened. Her cubs were walking with a human. The realization made her freeze. The human hadn't killed them. The human was protecting them. She stood there for a long time, her claws flexing in confusion. Then her rage softened, not gone, but mixed now with curiosity and doubt. She whispered to the wind, "Why? Human? Why take what is mine and yet keep them alive?" The forest didn't answer. Only the cold wind passed through the branches. As night fell, she climbed to a high stone ledge and looked down at the valley below. The stars of Kereth were glimmered faintly through the smoke. Far away, a single flicker of light blinked between the trees, a weak human beacon. Her eyes glowed with reflected fire. She would follow that light until the truth revealed itself. Whether the human was an enemy or something else, she would find out soon enough. And if the stars were kind, she would hold her cubs again. Until then, the forest trembled with each step she took, and the world of predators waited for the dawn. Because now, the mother of hunters had begun her hunt for the savior. The second night came cold and heavy. The forests of Kereth glowed under its twin moons, their pale light washing over broken trees and pools of silver mist. Mira Solon sat beside a small fire hidden under a rock overhang. The flames flickered low, fed by bits of dry which she had scavenged. Beside her, the two Kereth cubs slept curled together, tiny tails twitching in dreams. She watched them quietly, her eyes half closed. For the first time in days, she wasn't running. For the first time since the war began, she wasn't fighting anyone. She took a slow sip from her canteen, then whispered to herself, "You've officially lost it, Solon. Sitting here babysitting predators." Command would love that report. Her voice echoed softly, swallowed by the night. One of the cubs stirred. The smaller one, the one with the dark patch on its back, yawned and blinked sleepily. Its golden eyes caught the firelight, glowing like two tiny suns. It gave a curious chirp, tilted its head, and then climbed onto Myra's lap without hesitation. "Hey there," Mira said, smiling faintly. "You're not afraid anymore, huh?" The cub sniffed at her chest armor, then rubbed its head against her shoulder. Its fur was soft, almost weightless. Mira reached up and gently scratched behind its small ear. The cub purred, a strange, vibrating hum that she could feel through her armor plates. The sound made her heart ache. The other cub woke soon after and joined them, climbing over her knees and trying to nibble at her glove. Mira laughed, really laughed. For the first time in months, it felt wrong and right at the same time. "You two have no idea what's going on, do you?" she said. "Your whole world burned down and you're still just being kids." She stopped speaking for a moment, watching them. They were learning fast. When she offered food, they didn't flinch anymore. When she moved, they followed. They were starting to trust her completely, and that trust terrified her. Because somewhere out there, their mother, the Kereth matriarch, was hunting for them. Mira knew that if the creature ever found her with these cubs, there wouldn't be time to explain. Still, she couldn't bring herself to leave them. She looked up at the stars, her eyes tired but alert. "You'd think a human and two predators could make a decent story," she said quietly. "But I don't think this one ends happy." The cubs purred louder, pressing closer against her. Their warmth reminded her of something she had buried long ago, the feeling of holding her little brother before the war took him. The memory came uninvited but gentle, like a whisper from another life. For a while, everything was still. The wind moved softly through the glowing trees. The only sounds were the quiet crackle of the fire and the breathing of the cubs. Then a faint beat broke the calm. Myra's visor flashed, motion detected. Range, 300 meters. Large size, moving fast. Her blood ran cold. She shut off the fire with a quick stomp of dirt and grabbed her knife. "Not tonight," she muttered. She crouched low, peering through the mist. The sensor pinged again, closer now. 200 meters. Then 150. The cubs sensed it too. Their ears perked, small bodies tensing. One gave a nervous chirp, and Mira quickly pressed a finger to her lips. "Shoo, quiet, babies." The forest went deathly silent. Then came the sound, a heavy, rhythmic breathing that shook the leaves. The air seemed to vibrate. Myra's eyes widened. She knew that sound. The mother predator was near. Her heart raced. If she ran, the cubs would cry out. If she stayed, the mother might track her scent. Either choice meant death. She turned off her visor light completely and waited, every muscle locked. Minutes crawled by like hours. The massive shadow moved between the trees, tall, graceful, terrifying. The predator stopped near the riverbank, head turning slowly. Mira could see the faint red glimmer of its eyes through the fog. Her hand tightened on her knife, but she didn't move. The cubs pressed against her chest, trembling. She could feel their small hearts beating fast. The creature sniffed the air once, twice, then slowly turned away. It walked downstream, fading into the fog. Only when the sound was gone did Mira exhale. Her body shook with relief. "That was too close," she whispered. She looked down at the cubs. "She's still looking for you. She's not giving up." They looked up at her with wide eyes, not understanding. Mira sighed. "Yeah, I know. You miss her." For a long moment, she just sat there, staring into the dark where the mother had disappeared. Part of her wanted to follow, to hand the cubs back, to end the nightmare. But another part, the human part that had seen too much war, didn't trust what would happen next. Would the mother understand mercy? Or would she kill first, ask questions later? Mira leaned back against the cold rock and closed her eyes. "Tomorrow," she said softly. "Tomorrow we decide." The cubs yawned again, curling up on her lap. The smaller one reached up, resting its paw against her hand. She stared at it, that tiny paw with sharp claws that could one day tear through armor, and smiled faintly. "You're supposed to be the enemy," she whispered. "So why do I feel safer with you than with my own kind?" Above them, the twin moons drifted higher, painting the ruins in pale light. Somewhere far away, a distant roar echoed, not of rage this time, but of longing. The sound carried across the valley, soft and sorrowful, almost like a lullaby. Mira didn't move. The cubs slept through it, their tiny chests rising and falling. And for that one quiet hour, predator and prey, hunter and soldier, mother and orphan, all of them shared the same fragile peace. A bond had been formed in the ashes of war, and it was growing stronger with every heartbeat. The morning came slow and gray. Mist covered the valley like a blanket of ghosts. Every sound was muted. The whisper of wind, the drip of water, the soft rustle of leaves. Mira Solon stood at the edge of a clearing, her breath visible in the cold air. She had not slept. All night she had watched the stars fade and the sky turn pale. The cub slept curled in her jacket, unaware of what she had decided. Today would be the end. She looked down at them one last time. The smaller cub blinked awake, yawning, its small fangs flashing the light. The other rubbed its head against her chest, purring softly. They trusted her completely now, and that was why it hurt so much. Mira whispered, "You don't belong with me. You never did." Her voice cracked, but she kept her face hard. Your mother's out there. She's looking for you. I can't keep hiding forever." She took a deep breath and stepped into the open. The forest before her stretched wide and endless, silver trees glowing faintly under the new sun. Birds rose in the distance, scattering through the mist. Somewhere far off, a low growl echoed. Myra's heart tightened. She knew that sound. The predator mother was near. Her plan was simple, dangerous but simple. She would leave the cubs at the clearing center and back away slowly. Maybe the mother would take them and leave her alive. Maybe not, but at least the cubs would be safe. She placed them gently on the soft grass. They whined, confused, crawling back toward her. "No," Mira whispered, her throat dry. "Stay." The cubs tilted their heads, their eyes wide and bright. They didn't understand. One paw reached out, catching her sleeve. Mira looked away. Her chest ached so badly she could barely breathe. Then the ground trembled. A heavy sound echoed through the trees. Footsteps, slow and deliberate. Branches snapped. The air grew colder. The cubs froze. Their ears perked up, and they turned toward the sound. Their little bodies began to shake, not from fear, but from recognition. Mira lifted her eyes and saw her. The predator mother stepped out from the fog like a living shadow. Her armor shimmered with faint light. Scars ran down her chest, and her claws were stained with ash. She was enormous, towering twice Myra's height, her presence commanding, ancient and terrifying. For a moment, neither moved. Myra's breath caught. Every instinct screamed to run, to hide, to fight, but she didn't move. Instead, she knelt down slowly, her hands open, her weapon left behind on the ground. "It's all right," she whispered, more to herself than to the creature. "They're yours." The mother's eyes glowed red in the mist. Her gaze swept over Mira, sharp and calculating. The air hummed with danger. Then the cubs made a sound, a soft, high-pitched chirp. They ran forward on clumsy legs, stumbling over the grass. The predator's head snapped toward them. Her breathing changed, deep, fast, almost trembling. The cubs reached her and leapt against her legs, pressing their faces into her fur. She made a low, rumbling sound, not a growl this time, but something softer. A sound Mira had never heard from a carrot before. It was the sound of a mother calling her young. Mira felt tears in her eyes, though she didn't know why. The sight was both beautiful and terrible, the power of a creature she feared all her life, kneeling down to nuzzle her cubs like any mother would. The mother looked down at them, checking their small bodies, smelling their fur. She licked the side of one cub's face, then froze. Her eyes lifted again, straight to Mira. Myra's heart stopped. The mother's gaze was no longer confused. It was understanding. Mira swallowed hard. "They survived because of me," she said quietly. "I fed them, kept them warm. That's all." The predator tilted her head. For a long moment, she said nothing. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Then she stepped forward, slowly, carefully. Her massive form loomed above Mira. The cubs followed, mewing softly. Mira stayed still. "If you're going to kill me," she whispered, "do it fast." The predator stopped inches away. Her clawed hand rose, sharp and black against the gray light. Mira didn't flinch. She closed her eyes. But the blow never came. Instead, something cold and heavy touched her chest. Not a strike, but a gesture. The predator pressed one clawed hand over Myra's heart, lightly, as if marking her. Her claws did not cut. They rested there, firm but gentle. The gesture was old. Mira recognized it from military logs and translated Kareth culture files. Among their kind, it meant respect. It meant honor. Mira opened her eyes. The predator looked at her for a long moment, then nodded once, a slow, deliberate nod. Then, without another sound, she turned away. The cubs looked back at Mira, confused, chirping softly. Mira smiled weakly. "Go on," she said. "You're home now." The mother led them into the mist. Their shapes faded between the glowing trees, until only the forest remained. Mira stood there for a long time, shaking, her knees weak. She touched her chest where the claw had rested. The spot felt warm. The silence returned, but it wasn't empty anymore. She looked up at the gray sky and whispered, "Goodbye, little ones." Then she turned toward the distant ridge, where the faint signal of the distress beacon still blinked. She still had a war to survive, but something inside her had changed forever. For the first time, Mira Solon no longer felt like just a soldier. She felt human again. And somewhere deep in the alien forest, a predator mother lifted her head to the sky and let out a low, soft call, one that echoed not with fury but with gratitude. The wind of Carafor moved gently through the forest, carrying with it the smell of ash and new life. The fires had long faded, and the silence that once meant death now felt different, like the pause that follows healing. Mira Solon walked slowly through the gray trees. Her armor was scratched and dull, her steps heavy, but her eyes were calm. It had been 3 days since the meeting. 3 long, quiet days since she'd last seen the predator mother and her cubs disappear into the mist. Every hour since, Mira had replayed that moment in her mind, the way the mother had pressed her claw against Myra's heart, not in anger, but in understanding. It had been brief, but in that one gesture, everything had changed. Now she was heading north, toward the human distress beacon she had found on her visor. The signal grew stronger with every mile, a steady pulse calling her back to the world of soldiers and machines. The forest thinned, giving way to open fields burned black from battle. Mira stopped at the ridge and turned around for one last look. The silver trees stood tall again, swaying under the twin suns. Somewhere in there, somewhere hidden, were the cubs she had saved. She smiled faintly. "Stay safe, little monsters," she whispered. Then she started down the slope. The wreckage of a transport ship lay ahead, its hull half buried in the ground. The beacon flashed in the cockpit, weak but alive. She climbed inside, moving carefully through the debris. The air smelled like rust and fuel. She found the comms panel and tried to power it. It sparked once, then blinked green. Her voice cracked as she spoke. "This is Sergeant Mira Solon, Terran Rangers. Broadcasting emergency signal. Any friendly ships in orbit respond." Static answered first. Then, after a few long seconds, a voice came through, distant but clear. "Sergeant Solon, this is Command Vessel Talone. You're alive? We thought the whole unit was gone." Mira laughed softly, shaking her head. "Guess I'm harder to kill than most." "Copy that," the voice replied. "Stay where you are. We're tracking your location now. Extraction in 12 hours. 12 hours, she repeated. "Got it." When the comms went silent, she sank down against the wall and closed her eyes. For the first time since the crash, she felt safe. But peace, she realized, felt strange. It was too quiet, too empty. Her hand went instinctively to her chest, to the spot where the predator's claw had rested. She could almost feel it still, cold and strong, but gentle. That mark wasn't just on her armor. It was burned into her memory. Outside, the wind picked up again. A faint sound drifted through it, soft, almost like a whisper, a growl, then another. Myra's eyes snapped open. She stood and moved to the opening in the hull. The forest line was still far, but between the trees, something moved. 2 small figures stepped into the sunlight, their fur silver and gold. Her heart stopped. The cubs. They had grown in just a few days, a little taller, stronger. They ran clumsily toward her, chirping and mewling, their tiny tails flicking in excitement. Mira stepped out, stunned. "What are you doing here?" Before she could move, a shadow fell across the ground. The air grew heavy. The predator mother appeared at the forest's edge, silent, massive, watching. The cubs reached Mira and circled her boots, rubbing against her legs like they used to. She knelt down, laughing quietly, tears stinging her eyes. "You came back." She looked up at the mother. The creature stood tall, calm, her glowing eyes fixed on Mira. She made no move to attack. Instead, she gave a deep, low sound, not a roar, but something softer. It rolled through the valley like a voice of respect. Mira understood. The mother had not come to reclaim the cubs. She had brought them to say goodbye properly. The two cubs pressed their heads against Myra's chest one last time, their small bodies trembling with soundless purrs. Mira stroked their fur gently. "Go on," she whispered. "She's waiting for you." The cubs hesitated, then turned back toward the forest. The mother stepped aside, letting them pass. Before leaving, she looked at Mira again. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other. Soldier and predator, two enemies bound by something deeper than war. Mira raised her hand slowly, palm open. The predator tilted her head and mirrored the gesture, her clawed hand rising in a quiet salute. Then, without a sound, the mother turned and disappeared into the forest. The cubs followed, their silver fur vanishing among the glowing trees. Mira stood there long after they were gone, the wind brushing through her hair. When the Talon finally arrived that evening, she was ready. The rescue team found her sitting on the ridge, staring at the horizon. They asked what had happened, how she had survived, how she had managed to last in a forest full of predators. Mira thought for a moment, then smiled faintly. "I had company," she said. The team looked at her, confused, but she didn't explain. Some things, she knew, weren't meant for reports or debriefs. Some stories were better kept between hearts, human and alien alike. As the shuttle lifted into the air, Mira looked down through the open hatch. The forest of Kareth forestretched endlessly below, glowing softly under the fading light. Somewhere in that vast world, a mother and her cubs were safe. And in that thought, Mira found something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. War had taken everything from her, friends, home, and peace. But in the ashes of that war, something new had grown, something fragile, something pure, a bond between species that were never meant to understand each other, and yet somehow did. As the stars came into view, Mira whispered to herself, "Maybe not all monsters are what we think they are." And far below, deep in the alien forest, a low, distant roar answered, soft, warm, and almost human.